I'd like to call upon Aditi on stage. Aditi Puri, she's the head of sales with Intuit, and she's going to talk about selling to SMEs in India. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Aditi, for a deeper dive into this.
Thank you, Priya. Hi, everyone. Am I audible at the back? Okay, great. So hi, I'm Aditi Batra. I lead sales at Intuit India, where we sell our flagship product, QuickBooks Online. It's a cloud-based accounting software to small and medium-sized businesses in India. So prior to that, can I get the clicker? Sorry, just give me a minute. So I'll continue with a little bit about myself. So prior to Intuit, I was at Amazon. I led sales for the marketplace business at Amazon, where my team recruited and managed sellers on the platform that Amazon created. So we really started from scratch, and today, as you know, the Amazon marketplace business has a little over 300,000 sellers. Prior to Amazon, I was at Google, where my team forged strategic alliances with companies that sold our advertising products to small to medium businesses in India. So all in all, around 12 years of experience in the SME market, and I'm here to share some of my insights and learnings in my experience of having sold to small to medium businesses. So the format that I'm going to follow, let me just figure out how this works. Do I just click the button, Priya? Doesn't seem to be working. There we go, okay. So the format I was thinking I would follow is, I'll share the challenges that I've faced while selling to SMBs in India. And then I'll talk a little bit about, solutions that we've implemented in the SME space. But before I do that, just for me to get a sense of the audience, just by show of hands, like how many people selling to small businesses today in the audience? Okay, quite a bit, close to 50%. And how many of you find it challenging or tough? Okay. So it seems like pretty much all of you, right? And those, who's nailed it with respect to selling to businesses that are small? Anyone who's like cracked the secret formula in India? Thank you, I take that compliment. So let me begin by talking about the SMB landscape in India. Overall, 57 million small to medium businesses, employing a workforce of 117 million, huge, contributing to 40%, close to 40% of the GDP. Again, like massive, massive opportunity that a lot of people talk about, right? But for those of you who are in sales, people like me, find this extremely complex and daunting. It's not that easy. And especially when it comes to, SaaS, like our product is a SaaS cloud-based accounting software. Now what we see is the SaaS market in India is less than 10% in terms of revenues as compared to the global, as a part of the overall global SaaS SME market, right? So I think most of the companies that are in the SaaS space, they're getting their revenues from outside of India. So they've not really, cracked the secret sauce with respect to India, right? They're still trying to figure their way out. So that's the piece that we are trying to solve at Intuit, and I'll share a couple of examples with you as well. So let me start with some of the challenges that I've faced. And the first one I want to talk about is the lag in tech adoption. So tech adoption, we may say that there's a lot happening in the whole digital transformation and people moving to the cloud. But the reality is, with respect to small businesses, it's still fairly new, right? When we talk about 57 million, 20 million of those, and that's it, right? Only 20 million have access to digital infrastructure. So it's not really 57 million. And within that 20 million, there are only around 5 million that have access to what we call digitally enabled, which is using a cloud-based accounting software. Now, if you're in a business like ours and you target a niche segment within that, right? I want to move away. I think I'm blocking the screen. So if you're targeting a niche segment within that, then it becomes all the more complex because then your market segment is reducing from 5 million to even smaller, right? So your cost of acquisition, your investments, your CAC pretty much goes up substantially if you're the more narrow that you go, right? So what do? It is a complex problem. My learning, stop selling to them for a minute. So just forget the fact that you're selling to them, right? Focus on enablement. And what I mean by that is a lot of times what we've learned is, SMEs may be interested in buying your product or learning about your product, but a lot of times they don't really have the capability. And let me explain what I mean. And this may sound a little cliche, but we talk about, be obsessed about your customers, and many successful companies talk about customer obsession, working backwards from the customer. There's a reason to that, right? It's not easy, but those companies that focus on the customer, learn about their needs, learn about their challenges and pain points, those are the ones that are able to crack it. So let me give an example from my experience. And this was my time at Amazon. So when I joined Amazon in India, very early days at Amazon, right? The name was not really known in India, so very different situation from where we are today. In fact, we used to pick up the phone and call up a small retailer and say that, hey, I'm calling from Amazon. And the reply we would get is, what is this company, Amazon? We haven't heard of you, right? So those are the days, like 7, 8 years back that I'm talking about. So what did we do? As we met more and more of these small businesses, what we learned is, while they showed interest, because there was this whole shift happening with respect to online in India, they were interested and they wanted to find out, like, what is this selling online about? But they were not really enabled. So selling online means you need to have a digitized catalog. You need to have images which you can put online in an automated manner onto our portal. They didn't have the capability to do that. So what did Amazon do at that point in time? What we did is what you see over there, which is the service provider network, didn't exist anywhere else in the globe. Amazon doesn't have that solution outside of India. So we hired a bunch of professionals who we trained, and they went out there to the seller location, and they created the catalog on behalf of the seller. So creating images, converting their awesome selection that they had into a digitized format. So we were literally like creating something from scratch. And I think today, the number of service providers that Amazon has, it runs into the thousands. So once they started selling, what we realized is they were not very good, and they didn't really understand in terms of how to manage their business. It's an automated, self-serve platform. You pretty much need to do it yourself. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we started running into. So what did we do? We created something called the Amazon e-commerce trained specialist program. Again, didn't exist anywhere else, doesn't exist anywhere that Amazon operates apart from India. But basically, we trained professionals who went door to door, met our customers that we had, and they taught them how to use Amazon. In some cases, for a small fee, they even agreed to manage the account of these sellers on their behalf. And they found a business opportunity there for themselves. Again, this network today runs into the thousands across multiple cities in India. The last example I want to give here is, as Amazon expanded and went into global selling, which is something that my team did, we went to sellers with the concept, and the concept was super exciting, right? You go to any small business and you say, hey, we'll help you get customers not only in India, but we'll get you customers, say, sitting in Seattle in the US. Super excited. but then there was no enablement. There was no infrastructure that enabled that. So what we created is a program which would actually pick up that selection from the seller's warehouse, inject it into a courier system, and then ship it to a customer sitting in Seattle. My point is, if you and your product that you have is targeting a particular segment, and if you just limit to that, you're basically limiting the pie. However, if you focus on enablement and understanding the broader ecosystem, then you're actually expanding the pie, and the opportunity for you increases accordingly. So the second challenge I want to talk about, we face this a lot, is in my business, do I go with inside sales or do I go with field sales? Either way, field sales could be a lot more expensive and time intensive and complicated to set up. So what do I do? And my response there and my advice to all of you would be, it doesn't really matter, right? It really depends on your appetite for your CAC and costs, but it's not that black and white. What I would advise is, what you need to focus on is how you leverage the power of the ecosystem to drive nonlinear growth. And let me explain what I mean by that, right? So at Intuit, so I have an inside sales team, right, that sells directly to small to medium businesses. And then we also have a field sales team that's selling to one of our important influencers in the ecosystem, which is accountants. And what this does is, it's getting me nonlinear growth, because for every accountant that I acquire multiple small businesses at the same time. So my CAC, or my cost of acquisition, ends up being much lower. The other thing that we're investing in is partnerships. So we look at who are the players in the ecosystem that either have a large base of small to medium businesses or are also targeting small businesses that I can partner with to co-market. So an example of that is banks. We work very closely with banks, not only from a customer experience perspective, but also, so from a customer experience perspective, we integrate their data feeds into our product. So banking and accounting, there's a lot of synergy, so it goes hand in hand and improves the value for both the bank as well as us. But we also partner for co-marketing. So we access and do promotions across each other's database, which benefits both of us. So my advice to you would be, look at your business and look at partners that basically have a synergistic offering with what you're going to market with. Now, these could be OEM providers, these could be banks, it could be telcos, it could be startups. Startups is a huge area of opportunity. I mean, there's so much of innovation happening there. And look at who you can partner with, either people who have a large SMB base, or can partner with you so that your offering becomes more sticky and more meaningful when you're going to the small business. The other example I want to give related to the leveraging the power of the ecosystem is how you're opening up your platform to basically open up to developers and the app ecosystem, which is huge, right? So an example of this is, I'm a salesperson, I go to an SMB and I say that, hey, buy my accounting software, right? I have another software that I've been using the last X years, maybe I'll think about it. However, I also know that since you're a small business, you may be interested in a payroll solution. Your employees are increasing, so you may want a solution that helps you manage their time, so like timesheets or time tracking. And because you're a small business and you struggle with capital, you may need a lending solution which helps you mobilize your working capital. So then my offering becomes a lot more stickier, right? Which is one of the things that we've done at Intuit. So QuickBooks, our own offerings are a combination of time tracking, lending, and capital. However, it doesn't stop there. Once you open up the ecosystem, this is what starts happening, right? So when you meet a small business, then you're going with a plethora of solutions that meet the requirement. So if I go to a retailer, then I need inventory management, or I need a way to manage my expenses. So your value to the small business accordingly goes up. So again, my advice here, don't think in silos. Don't think about only direct or inside sales, which is a one-to-one approach. Think comprehensive, think strategic. Look at how you can leverage the power of the ecosystem to drive your growth. The third challenge I want to talk about is, I think a lot of you in the room would be familiar with this. India, we all know, is a do-it-for-me market, right? I mean, it's just culturally, we're attuned that way. We require a lot of hand-holding. We have the culture of, why don't you come to my office, have a cup of tea, and explain it to me, right? Which makes it super tough for businesses that are in SaaS that are trying to control their costs. It's really, really tough. And my advice there, or our learning has been, you can't really ignore it. You need to invest in engagement, and you need to do that investment in the short term, but in the long term, look for ways that you can automate it. Let me explain what I mean. So when you initially launch a product, customers will want training, they will want to know how to use your product, and you need to invest in that education. So don't be afraid to offer things like, manual assist, phone support, investing in things like demos, investing in onboarding, and that could be manual onboarding as well to begin with. And you may think, this is really going to shoot up my costs, right? But here's what's going to happen. In a couple of months or after some time, you'll see a pattern emerging for why customers are getting in touch with you. And you'll be able to identify that, okay, these are the frequent reasons why they get in touch with me. And that's when you will be able to apply things like AI, ML to start automating some of those things and taking away and pulling back on the manual support. Example of that, I'll give two examples here. One, 2 days back, we launched Quickbooks Assistant. So we've been in the India market the last couple of years. We have manual support that we offer to our customers. And what we realized is 60% of people who come to us are coming with, how do I do this? I don't understand it. Can you help me, right? And over time, we've been able to automate that into a solution which is an innovative way of offering self-help through a chatbot using AI, right? And over time, you can get more and more automated with this solution. But the thing is, moving away from manual, not being afraid to invest in manual solutions in the short term, because in the long term, ideally, your goal should be moved towards automation. Another example here is IKEA, a brand that's traditional. The last challenge that I want to talk about is, which close to the heart of many people in sales, how do I drive leads? And how do I drive relevant, qualified leads? Now, if you're, again, in a very niche vertical that you're targeting small to medium businesses, you may have realized that online acquisition tends to be expensive. I don't think anyone has nailed it. I was talking to the Google people a couple of weeks back, and I think the innovation that we're making for the B2C space is huge. It's amazing. But I don't think we've cracked it when it comes to small businesses, right? So meaning when you go more and more narrow, when you're using online channels, they tend to become more and more expensive. So maybe not that feasible. And there's a saturation point that you reach really soon. Similarly, LinkedIn as a channel tends to be sometimes expensive, especially if you're starting out, right? So what do? My advice there would be try and get innovative. I don't think there is an existing playbook that exists from somewhere else or other companies. You need to create your own playbook and try what works for you. So don't be afraid to, try. You'll try 10 things, maybe 2 will work, but at the end of it, you'll know that these are the 2 that you need to double down on. And I'll share 3 trends that have worked for us in the companies where I have worked. The first one is thinking about the regional aspect of India. So 9 out of 10 users that come online today in India, in the future, will be consuming local, regional content, not in English. In fact, English consumption is less than 10% of people today. I think it's around 7 to 8%. Also, I think by 2021, consider this fact that 75% of the online users will be consuming content in regional local languages. So that segment is fast growing. And if that's not part of your marketing or your acquisition strategy, then you're losing out. So things that work well, think about local content in blogs, in social, in PR. That needs to be a core part of the way you generate leads. The other is, we may not realize it, but there are many regional blogs and websites which are a very cost-effective way to target and reach our audience, right? So don't forget about that. Once you have your consumer profile and know the segment that you're targeting, do your research with respect to who are the regional sites or what is my regional strategy that I need to be aware of. Because in my opinion, I don't think this is something you can ignore. The second one is leveraging videos. Consider this statistic. 500 million users are consuming content, that's video content, by 2020, in the next 2 years. So the market potential is huge. And if your strategy for acquiring leads or acquiring customers doesn't have video, then you're missing out something. Now, whether it's from an advertising perspective, whether it's creating how-to videos, whether it's creating customer testimonials and putting them on the web, that needs to be a key part, and it will be a cost-effective channel for you to acquire your customers as well. The last piece, and I've personally had a lot of experience with this, is you can't win in the SMB market with an only online approach, so you need to get innovative with respect to offline. Now, most of us in the room potentially are starting out, entrepreneurs, setting up new businesses. Hey, I don't have millions of dollars to invest in ATL and BTL, so how do I do offline? My suggestion there would be get innovative. Look at how Amazon did it with Chai Cart, right? When they realized that sellers in the afternoon like to have a cup of tea, hang out, so they had this 3-wheel cart which went around in like 31 cities distributing cups of chai and spreading awareness about Amazon. So think about SMB meetups, think about local activations, think about SMB regional associations that you can partner with and that can help spread the awareness, because a lot of small businesses are also struggling with the whole transformation to SaaS and cloud and would really love to hear you out. So those are the 4 challenges that I wanted to share with you today. And just to sum up, in terms of my advice or basis my learnings, I would say focus on your customer, focus on enabling them, so you're actually expanding the pie, right? Another example is Google. They've not only focused on advertising, but they've invested hugely in infrastructure and they've managed to expand the pie quite a bit, right? Geo is another example that's done that in the last year and a half. So focus on enablement. I can't stress enough how important that is. The third one is leveraging the power of the ecosystem to drive non-linear growth. Super, super important in terms of partners, alliances, resellers, channel. That needs to be a core part of your strategy. The third one I talked about is getting innovative in terms of generating leads. Think about that piece, super important. Engagement. Otherwise, you'll end up with a leaky bucket. The more you spend, it'll all leak. There's no point. The last one that I'll leave you with is a question we think about and we get asked a lot is, how are you going to make money in India? We realize that the opportunity is massive, right? My learning and my advice would be have a long-term play to get to monetization, but in the short term, focus on getting users to try your product in a frictionless manner. Just take away the friction. for them to do that. So that's about it, folks. I'll open it up to Q&A, and we have just around 5 minutes left. Any questions? Please.
Hi.
Hi.
So your product, when you
If
launched...
you can introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my name is Tanmay. I was an Intuit customer, but I had to get out because didn't find all the features that we're looking for.
Sure.
So how was your experience coming to the Indian market and having to build your product or cater to the Indian needs from a product perspective and features?
Sure. Thank you for asking the question, Tanmay. So in my opinion, you need to, the starting point, so I talked about the customer, right? That is the starting point in terms of understanding their needs and challenges. So you need to invest the time in terms of really spending that time with the customer. Once you understand what their needs are, the piece around how your product fits into their ecosystem will come naturally to you, right? And I think we're on that journey at Intuit right now, where I don't know the time when you used our product, but it's come a long way since then. In fact, with the whole changes that are happening with GST in the last 1 year, customers, because we've been able to transform our products along with that, customers are seeing a lot of value in terms of using that. So my advice, focus on the customer, get your product right before you go to market.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
My question is that in Indian environment, and particularly for SMBs, customer feels satisfied only when his requirement is met. His any additional requirement that is not in the existing software, he gives you, and until and unless you don't do it, he doesn't get satisfied. It's his intention. How do you deal with it?
So I would go back to my point that I made around partners, right? So your product may be able to solve only for a certain part of his need. It can't solve for everything. So the piece you need to understand is where your product fits into the challenges that the small business is facing and how important is that. And then how do you bring other partners? Now that could be through alliances, it could be through like app developers to solve the SMB's need. But loyalty, engagement will only come when, the stickiness will come when you're solving a broader part of his life in terms of challenges that he faces, versus if you keep focused on, this is my product, buy it because I'm solving for this small piece, you'll struggle with stickiness and loyalty over time. That would be my advice.
Hi, my name is Hari, and
Hi,
I work for a similar firm, Epicor. So we've been for a while now trying to penetrate the Indian market as well, especially the SMB space. And we talked about how or the customer base that we're focusing on, right? And what's the approach to necessarily kind of win the customer's trust in your solution. But also from a pricing point, SMB is in India especially is an extremely price sensitive space here. And for companies like us who have the solution across the globe, do you take a differentiated approach selling to customers in India from pricing perspective versus global? Does that play an important factor, and is that a decision that you kind of mulled over at the onset itself?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? Because different markets. So, for example, if you compare to a market like France, right? The price points that you can charge, or even US, the price points that you can charge would be much higher than the propensity to pay in India. So, how do you price your product is a big consideration into your overall strategy to win. Now, again, our learning there is. Long term, you need to be, so don't underestimate the power of the SMB to pay. If they find value in your product, they will pay. So the worst thing is to get into a pricing war, and ultimately it will end up hurting all parties involved in that ecosystem. So they will pay if they find value. So long term, you should be clear in terms of what your pricing needs to be, right? And what your LTV over CAC is for you to have a sustainable business. That's like super important. However, don't let the short term compromise. You need to allow an opportunity to small businesses to experience your product, right? Because unless they've experienced it and seen the value, they will not, I mean, it's not a long-term game. So your pricing in the short term needs to be like super, super competitive and just take away the friction. So that's what I would recommend.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Aditi. Thank you so much for delving into real-life examples and challenges, because that always resonates. Thank you for taking the time as well.